Welcome to the Last American Vagabond. What the hell is happening? Another episode today with Charlie Robinson discuss the madness of this crazy cycle. As always, as we've said the last few times, the point was kind of just to reflect on how crazy the cycle is. And it really does increasingly make this point. I mean, I was even just thinking from last time, like, I completely lose where we even were with the conversation. I think that's kind of the entire point, right? It's like just so much chaos today. So Charlie joining us again to go over all the different madness. And it's the way we kind of set this up. We don't really have much planned. I have different things that I want to get into. And the point is to kind of just have a good conversation about where we are with our different work. So Charlie today with his macroaggressions website, as well as the activist post. Don't forget, that is the new platform he's running. Make sure you check that out as well. And talking to you about some crazy stuff today, brother. How are you?
Good to see you. Yeah, it's hard to remember where we left off. I'm sure it was crazy, and we probably thought it was going to get a little bit crazier, but there's one.
We were right.
When we were right, of course, unfortunately. One bit of good news, I would say interesting news, that came out this week is Del Bigtree has a new movie out, and he got into he had an interaction with a Dr. Marcus Zervos, who is an enthusiastic vaccine supporter, and they agreed to run a study on vaccine safety to see unvaccinated versus vaccinated. Because a lot of this is like we don't have the safety studies because they haven't done a lot of these basic tests. And I'm sure Dell was telling him this. And my assumption is that it probably was like, well, then let's just do a study together. And
so really
criteria
quick,
was
the pro-vaccine guy was on board to do that.
Yeah.
I see that. Let's talk about it. It's interesting. Keep going.
Yeah. And the requirement was that we publish the findings no matter what.
I love it.
And so you go from 2016 to 2020, it wraps up. They take a look at the numbers. It's a catastrophe for the vaccine guy, and he doesn't publish.
Of course. But see, what's really fascinating to me is that this shows you that he, at least you'd assume that he thought that, so he was wrong, and he thought that somehow, with all the information, that he was going to be proven correct. That's a really interesting thing to think about, because the evidence is shockingly obvious, but yet this guy, who's, I guess, an expert, or, what in the world allowed him to think that he was right? Probably trusting experts that are wrong. It's a fascinating overlap.
It's such an interesting study in human psychology too, and how people get bought into certain things, and it talks, goes back to Yuri Bezmenov talking about demoralization. I can shower them with authentic information, it won't change. They've been demoralized. And so some of this, you go into it making the assumption, oh, I'll just present logical, factual information, and then they'll see it and they'll go, oh, I didn't know this, and then they'll come around, and you do that, you have these interactions, and people don't respond that way. And what happened in this case was that the guy didn't publish it. So Dell hooked up, I guess, a hidden camera and went in and had a conversation with him about, like, hey man, like, what are we doing? Like, you said you were going to put this out. And he said, if I were to put this out, it would ruin my career. It'd end my career.
Wow.
Frankly, it might even end your life, knowing what we know about how dark the pharmaceutical industry could be. So that was the reasoning. I understand it. I don't respect it, but I understand it. And of course, I'm sure Dell, I'm sure that was a calculation he made as well. Like, when this comes out, he is not going to be happy with the results, and then he may not publish. And so I may have to get him to publish it or whatever. So that's where we are. And so, I think part of what this guy probably couldn't wrap his head around was that they had 2,000 unvaccinated kids, and not a single one of them had ADHD, diabetes, behavioral problems, learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, tics, or other psychological disorders.
No,
but the vaccinated group did. And he had to see that.
Yeah. To be objective, though, and I'm sure this is the way they did it, but just to ask, was it a randomly selected group of kids, or did they pick kids who were unvaccinated? Because if they got to choose them, you could argue, and trust me, I'm on your side of this, but
yeah, in that I don't know. I'd have to defer to Dell and to,
I would imagine,
Zervos, and who set it up and how they sort of what the criteria was for all of that.
But historically, that's exactly what they would do, because their interest is making sure that there's no excuse to deny the reality. And I very much believe that. The second point as well is that the guy not publishing shows you a second thing. Like, because, I'd argue somebody wouldn't go into this if they knew they would be proven wrong. Like, so he must have thought he would be right. And then he makes the conscious choice to not do it, which shows you at his hierarchy, his career is more important, or maybe he thinks he's going to be threatened. But like I said, there's no way you can respect that, or like you said, because that is your choose. So you're fronting about wanting to do right by people and keep them safe with vaccines is clearly not your motivating factor, right? I mean, because you now find out they're dangerous and you do nothing about that. It's crazy out there in this conversation. Do you have an article linked to that? You can bring it up on the screen as well.
No, but I
haven't heard.
No, but it was making the rounds quite a few places. I think if somebody just searched Del Bigtree, Dr. Marcus Zervos, and so elaborating a little bit more, what they did find in the vaccinated group, what was 3 times more developmental delays, 2.9 times more motor disabilities, 5.5 times higher risk for neurodevelopmental disorders, 4.5 times more speech disorders, which I think is understandable. And this was pre-COVID, by the way. This ended in 2020.
Right. Way worse.
6 times higher risk for autoimmune disorders. And then that encompasses 80 different diseases within autoimmune disorders. So that opens up, like, you're 6 times more likely to get 80 different types of things. Okay. So 3 times higher risk for atopic diseases. That's eczema. 6 times higher risk for ear infections. Like, as I'm a parent now, but I remember being a kid, and I remember when kids were out of school and they'd be out of school for a variety of things. And it seemed like ear infections was a real common thing. And I grew up just assuming kids get ear infections. I don't know. It's just kind of what it is. But then when I see that you're 6 times higher risk of ear infections by being vaccinated, I start to go, well, maybe it isn't like just natural that all kids get ear infections and need to get tubes in their ears or whatever. Like, there's something else at play here. And when it's laid out here with numbers behind, 4.29 times more likely to have asthma. How many kids do you know with an inhaler, growing up? And you go, well, that's just unlucky. He just, you go, well, maybe that's vaccine damage. And you start to go back inside your own world and start to, unpack things, go, what about that kid? And what about that person? And you go, my goodness, I mean, how much of what we just have normalized as, wear and tear, I guess, I don't know, just the cost of being alive is in actual fact because of these dangerous shots. And to have this come out, and they had to admit, so here's the quote from it. Here's from their findings. Quote, and this goes to what you said, they were expecting different results. Quote, in contrast to our expectations, we found that exposure to vaccination was independently associated with an overall 2.5-fold increase in the likelihood of developing a chronic health condition when compared to children unexposed to vaccination.
And so this did come out eventually, is that what you're saying? So is that okay? But this came out through. Well, let me make sure I understand it. So Dell went in with the hidden information, basically exposed that he didn't want to release it. Then how did it ultimately come out?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I haven't watched this movie yet. It makes me. I feel like
that's right. That's what I forgot.
Movie coming out. I'm assuming it's all explained in the movie. I just read an article on it and went down a little bit of that rabbit hole because of course, one of the things what they showed in the aftermath of this was that chance of developing a chronic disease. This is what they talked about, a 2.5-fold increase in likelihood of developing a chronic health condition. So the chance of developing a chronic disease in the first 10 years of life, vaccinated kids, 57%, unvaccinated kids, 17%.
Wow.
That's a gigantic number. All right. And you take that and you take these numbers that we've all seen the ratio that's coming down, unfortunately, about autism. And you start to go, okay, well, listen, if you're new to this, like, there's a lot of smoke here. There's a lot of smoke. At what point do you have to recognize that maybe there's a fire? I mean, I get it that there's a lot of psychological components at play where if you're somebody, a parent who has just because you were doing what you thought was the right thing, you have subjected your children to this, you put them through all this, and now you come to this realization and you have some kind of like moral crossroads to come to where you either have to acknowledge that you've made a mistake, though it wasn't really your fault, Or you double down and just say, no, vaccines are the only answer. I can't allow myself to accept the possibility that maybe I harmed my kids in some way because it wasn't their intention, and you don't want that guilt, and you don't know how to process all this. And so there's a psychological side to this that I think is really, really interesting. How, again, like the guy probably took a look at those results and just said, I can't reconcile this, and I cannot go back to work with the people I work with this. It's just like a huge F hanging over me, you know?
But I would argue you would. I would argue I would, right? And that's not, I'm not even trying to put us on some pedestal. I argue there's a lot more people out there that would, especially today with what we've all gone through, make the conscious choice to do things to their detriment that might expose a larger problem. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't I don't know how I could ever continue my day-to-day life knowing that I'm hiding something that is potentially killing that many people. You know, it's just I just can't even reconcile that, you know. But what's interesting though about the larger point is, you know, and I'm glad you said this because this is something I've talked about a lot, is, you know, we have this weird idea, like cancer is a big one where, we just, you know, people just get cancer. No, they don't just get cancer, right? No, you don't just randomly get an ear. Now, there are some more common things, like you can even argue like people that swim more often can get like ear infections, right? There's some overlaps, right? But the point is that there's always a catalyst, even if we can't figure that out. You don't just get ear infections, right? You don't just get cancer. There's something that is going wrong. Your body's reacting to that, and that's what's happening. And so what's so crazy is we've got this normalcy. Well, you know, this is just cold season. That's not how you look at that. You're getting a cold because your body is suffering, because your immune system is suffering. And so it's so fascinating that we're breaking through these walls. But I think the biggest thing to see is that people in these expert fields are the worst in this regard, you know? And it's just like, I'm glad Del Bigtree and the rest are doing this. I got to check out the movie. I mean, obviously their whole career has been calling this stuff out. Doesn't mean he's right about everything. There's plenty of things I could point out that we've disagreed on, but it's clear to me that his intentions are to try to break this down. So I'm glad to see that.
Yeah. And of course, it's not to say that vaccines give every child autism every time, right? It is sometimes
don't outweigh the risks for me.
There's a lot of factors at play here, and it's a contributing factor to it. And how much on the pie chart people want to assign responsibility to vaccines, that is obviously very subjective, and I think people can make cases for that. But when you just lay out the hard evidence, and then also just kind of the behavior of the person. Yeah, if I woke up one day and I realized I was that far off base with something, I think it would be a turning point in my life. You know, I'd have to just look at, you know, face myself and say, like, how could I have that big of a blind spot? And, you know, and I would be probably an advocate for vaccine safety if I were in his shoes. But
exactly,
of course, you know, this is the very human side of this. We're not all ideologically aligned on this. And some people don't have they have a flexible moral compass, or they have a mortgage payment that is making them make calculations that they don't love, but they have to make, and and all that stuff. And I mean,
the kids have medications they need, or, you know, there's always that's very common. That's
always a reason. There's an excuse. There's a justification, I guess, in some ways, if you try hard enough. But I mean, let's just be honest. This is hurting kids. The longer we pretend that this isn't a thing, those numbers on autism are not getting any better.
And how in the world we pretend it's not deliberate? That's my opinion, but my God, you know, like there's just really no way you break this all down and walk away thinking, oopsie, you know, it's just not possible for me.
And it's a force. I'd call it a force multiplier if it was for good, a force subtractor, I suppose, because it's not just the child who is sick with autism. And obviously, depending on the scale, how involved the parent needs to be, but now the parent is involved forever. For a lifetime. They can't sometimes give that's a child who doesn't age up and leave the nest. It turns into later in life a massive stress for the parents. What happens when I die? Who's going to take care of him?
Right.
You know, he's been with me forever. The only, you know, and so it's a contagion effect. It's not just the person, the kids and the numbers that we've seen, which are astronomical and alarming, but it's also that factor of who else in their orbit it impacts, and it never gets better, and it never goes away.
Yeah. And this is something that many of us have been calling out for a very, very, very long time, like way, way back before. And, and same to Wakefield and Del Bigtree, like, way ahead of most, right? But that and this is what's so crazy. I remember doing breakdowns on this, looking before there was even like provable, and I argue there's provable evidence today, just kind of going, I mean, come on, like look at this like exponential increase. Like over like a perfect correlation from 1986, right? It's like you just can't ignore that. And yeah, even at that time, I'm going, well, I'm not going to say I could prove this is exactly correlation is not causation, but you can't go from whatever 1 in 5,000, 1 in 15 or whatever the hell it is today. And that's the same thing with cancer, by the way. You can go from this radical reality, that over the process of like 20 years, almost every American one point in their life will get cancer from where it was before. Yeah. And then of course, overlap that with the idea that it's pretty much at one point, at least, and I think still somewhat today, one of the only pharmaceutical drugs where doctors get a direct cut of the profit of what they sell. Just, we live in a very broken system, but the good thing is that people are starting to see this, but the change hasn't happened yet. I think it's being stifled by a government pretending like they're fighting to change everything while they're instilling the problem forever. That's, you know what I'm talking about. But I'm glad we're talking about these things, though. Thank you for bringing it up today.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the first step towards fixing this is shocking people into understanding that not only is there, when you see these ratios, they're alarming, but then when you start to see higher numbers and of very specific issues. And I think that people then can recognize there's enough issues on this list of theirs that they can go, well, I know somebody with this. And then it starts to make you think, well, is it because of the shot? And so if you start to have that, if you're starting to question, that's where it begins. Right. You then start to ask questions. Well, maybe there's some questions about this, and maybe who's making this, and you go, well, I'm glad you asked. They're all convicted felons, and they pay a fine for harming people, and they don't worry about it.
It's just funny that we even, it's like all we can do is laugh about something like that. It's how crazy it is. And, that's not a hyperbolic statement. I mean, Pfizer, for example, has been literally charged with federal. Look at we've gone over that long Pfizer tracker list of all the times they've lied about safety regulations, lied about what they can do, lied about the side effects. There's like 10, I think what is last time I looked, it's billions of dollars, but at the same point with, as much as this makes people angry to point out, even Donald Trump is convicted despite the fact that nothing was ever done about it. People watching the show maybe knew, I'm not going to speak for Charlie, but I believe both of us argue that both sides of the paradigm, all of them, Biden and Trump, are pretty much the same criminal, but it's just wild though to see that we can be dealing with that face value and nothing changes. That's kind of what I was going to say about the point of all this with vaccines and everything is, the study's right there. The evidence continues. And I forget his name now. The guy who was from the CDC was the whistleblower, top tip my tongue, from
Hooker.
Yes, thank you. He did a study a long time ago that did the same thing. James Lyons Weiler came out with a recent one during COVID. All of these studies show you that vaccinated kids are far, far more unhealthy, and nothing continues to change. It's the same thing I'm saying about the recognition of Israel. It's like, how is it we keep having this reality? I think that's the first recognition we need to have, is that we have literally no influence on the outcome of what's happening in this country. And I'm sorry to say that, but we can see it. Like things that matter, we can all recognize the problem, and it just continues to just be narrative, and the people at the top of the fake paradigm scream at each other, and they go in front of Congress and yell, and just nothing ever changes. I'm not saying that we can't fix that. I know we can, but just we need to realize that we're there. Same with the vaccines.
The optimist in me says this is a coiled spring.
Mm-hmm.
Of frustration.
Oh yeah,
it is building and building and building with big pharma, with the Israel lobby, with a lot of things that it's been happening for a while. The noticing of a variety of topics has started. There's so it feels like maybe we're set to launch out of this into a new paradigm where people don't reflexively trust Anthony Fauci when he comes out there and says that we have to spend 2 weeks to flatten the curve, or the next person who tries to sell the next narrative. And people go, you know what? That sounds a little too Fauci-esque for me. No, thank you. Whatever, climate emergency. It'll be some new guy with a white lab coat who'll say, we looked at the in the sky and we have a climate emergency, and so you all have to be in your house. And I think maybe, I guess if I could be optimistic about what we went through over the last 5 years with COVID and all of that, is that I think for a segment of the population, it'll be tough to pull another one of these tricks again, because we've been so vocal about pointing out what they do, why they do it, how they do it. Hey, look, they're going to do this, and then they do it. And I think people have watched this enough. It's like watching a magician, watching how he does the trick. Next time around, next time you go to the show, you're like, I know how he does that. I know he's got it here, and you're looking there, and he's got the thing here, and boom. And so it just loses its power. That's the thing that has been felt like that I felt in the last 6 months. The grip, the narrative control seems to be loosening on a lot of things. People are pushing back about vaccines, and people are asking questions about Israel. And that is fantastic. That's a great start. But of course, as we know, it's not going to be enough. There's going to have to come a time where you make some decisions. I'm not taking any more shots. I'm not going to allow my kids to be a part of this. I'm not going to do that. Or I'm not going to go to my church whose pastor is telling me to go stand with Israel. Like, I'm not doing that. That's crazy talk. You know what I mean? So people are starting to ask questions, and I'd say, better late than never.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but I've talked a while back, not so much recently, but a while back about, redefining what success looks like, like understanding what is it. I think what we have to start to understand is that there may never be an outcome. That what we're doing is the point, right? Simply standing up for what is correct and fighting for the right things. And, I mean, as we see it, obviously we could disagree as individuals, but, I think that's what this comes down to. It's the kind of never ending battle of good and evil. Like, there's not going to be some moment where we go, plant the flag and we did it. It's all over. Like, it just never seems like that's the case. So I think it's important that we just recognize that the momentum of awareness is the win in and of itself,
100%. I think that it's very tough to quantify this stuff, but when people start reflexively asking questions about things, that's good. That's a place where, look, I'm not trying to tell people what to think at all. I know how I feel about things, but I would like to try and encourage people to learn how to be critical about this information. Maybe not what to think, but how to go about thinking about these processes, about what you're seeing. They're trying to sell me a narrative. They're trying to convince me to feel a certain way. I mean, my Twitter X feed is trying to make me hate people. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the simple awareness of that diffuses the power a little bit. So I can look at it and go, what are they trying to make me? They're trying to get me angry. They're showing me all kinds of fight videos today. I don't know why. I'm not liking them. I'm not even really watching them, but they know, whatever it is. So again, like, if you can get this new generation, the normies out there, you think however you want to think about Israel or vaccines or whatever, but just know that you're going to be sold a narrative that it's not going to be true. It's going to be very manipulative. And once you recognize that, then you're going to go, this is nonsense. This is trying to manipulate me into feeling a certain way. I wonder why they're doing that. It almost makes me want to feel the exact opposite way. You know what I mean? And so you start to recognize this. And I think that's I think that, to me, would be victory. Not that everybody thinks the way we think, because we're all going to think a little bit differently anyway, but just that they're thinking about thinking, that is sorely lacking, unfortunately, too, as we've noticed in this world. So just the thought that, like, hey man, you can't outsource your critical thinking to these lunatics. They don't want what you want. You're going to have to be responsible for the thoughts in your head and the information you consume and where you get it and who you listen to and all that stuff. And so that's your responsibility, is to, like, filter out all the nonsense and get good sources. So, I mean, like,
And so, and to take it a little further, so it's like, the point is the action of it. Like, and maybe they're not lying. Maybe they're using the truth to deceive you. Right. But it's about the intent, like questioning the intention. And maybe you never even find out the intention, because that's usually the hardest thing to really prove or find out in general. But it's the simple act of going, could they be lying? Could they be deceived with literally every single thing you come across? Now, that may sound exhausting, and that is in part the lie, right? They've trained you to be so passive and just accept what's presented for you because it's easier to manipulate people like that. You have to question everything while considering all possibilities. If your intention or desire is to be informed and be critical, right? You could choose to go do whatever you want, but it's the problem is the people that present themselves as being critical thinkers in the independent mainstream alternative media and then don't do that, right? It's like that's the illusion about it. But you're right, though, is it's like we just need to start applying that to everything and recognize it's not always a deception. Maybe the person saying this is acting with the best of intentions and they're being deceived. It's, it's very simple. Yep. I mean, everybody truly knows this at the core. There's just levels at which they decide to ignore it because my guy's the good guy, there's the bad guy. It all becomes very simple. But, it's the thing is, I think most people out there who are being deceived, who genuinely want good things for this country. That's one of the important things to recognize. They're not the villainous, ready to go. We're going to screw this person over because they're on the other side. Most of them have been convinced that you are the enemy because of what the other guy said. And, it's like, it's so important to break down on that. But to your point about the spring, it's interesting. I agree with that entirely. And I think what we see is the quote release valve efforts, to throw you a bone and say, okay, well, here's a redacted Epstein list. Is that spring loosening a little bit? Like a little steam out of there, and the point is that it's just not going to happen, and so now the question is, that's what I think we've both talked about many times in these very discussions. What seems to be happening with the technocratic rollout, the surveillance, the kind of tightening up, the control structure, the control grid, as Catherine discusses it, that is being done in an effort to make sure we get to a place to where they don't, at this point, the spring can pop off and it's not connected anymore. If it to go with the analogy, to where it won't make an effect. They don't care what we think or say. That's what we're fighting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a real concern. I mean, people are walking themselves into a digital prison here, and I'm alarmed by it. And the sales pitch is ongoing. And I'm also starting to get a bit freaked out. Well, not freaked out. That's not the right word, but just additionally alarmed about the consolidation of the media under Larry Ellison.
Yep,
in his group.
Right.
That to me is it's massively suspicious. I get bad vibes about all of it. His daughter's been involved in Hollywood as a producer for a long, long time. And it's not a real stretch to see him do this. And when you've got all the money in the world, you start buying assets like this. But I don't think this is part of a broader investment portfolio for Larry Ellison because of his intelligence ties. I just see this as a megaphone for Israel and the CIA because he's intertwined with both. I don't know where the Israel starts and the CIA stops,
I don't even think you can debate that, really. I mean, look at the outcome. Look at the immediacy of taking over TikTok and the very first things that happened, where it's an immediate clamp down on talking of Israel and even censorship around the discussion of the deal itself. You know what I mean? Like, there's no denying that. They just came out and clamped down. And so the point is, this is only one element of a much larger apparatus. Now, I mean, almost weirdly skeptical of why it's very prominent even in mainstream conversation. So, I kind of feel like I know it's important, but it's just one sliver of the larger control that's been there for a very long time. We've broken down the 6 companies that have basically now 4, Comcast, AT&T, that run everything, and he's just one part of that now. That's kind of tightening up one corner.
Yeah, he's got a proposal to acquire Warner Brothers, HBO, and CNN.
Wow. Yeah. See, Warner Brothers is a huge one that then this is probably behind the scenes come down to 2, maybe even just one conglomerate that effectively controls everything: media, print, radio. I mean, I guess, video, print, radio. Yeah. That's just think about the control that gives somebody today. Yeah. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, because, any good propaganda is like 95% truth. You only have to put a little bit of the negative in there. But this also gives them, even if they went with, we're going to give you 100% truth. Let's just say that they did that. Where they would get you would be the lies by omission.
Exactly.
It'd be the stories that were never talked about.
Right.
And that's it. So it's part of this. We have an attention span. We've got only so much that we can take in a day. We're going to prioritize what it is. Would love to get to that other good stuff, but they don't make it available, right? If they want to feed you a curated version of the news, and that's all it is, and the lie isn't anything that they told you. It's just that they didn't tell you about this massively important story that everybody should be talking about that they have kept hidden.
Yeah.
And that's really where the danger comes in. Of course, they will lie. So they have the Smith Modernization Act to protect them from lying. So they're, of course, going to be lying. And it'll be like Zionist propaganda like you've never seen before. And as you said about TikTok, just turn off all the accounts that are critical of that, have AI scan for keywords, talk about this, this, and that, and boom, everybody's gone. So it's not so much that they have to change the opinion of what people think about what Israel is doing. They just have to make it so you can't hear anything.
Yeah. And as they said very clearly, like that's what Yacarino was all about. Now she's kind of exited stage left, I guess, but it's just very weird that she was like, that most people, I think it was something like 90%, or she threw out a number. I've never looked into it, but her claim was that very high amount of people will correct their action. Not necessarily wrong or illegal, but just correct whatever they want them to correct. Should they give them that nudge and say, oop, you're muted for 24 hours, then most people will end up never doing that again. And this is something I saw in regard to people like us, where somebody's trying to send us a direct message and they get their account locked. And somebody sent me this twice, it happened. And so that would probably never reach out to me again. It's very easy to see how social engineering is taking place. And this is like the benign on surface kind of stuff. Like God only knows the kind of stuff they're doing, and very deep algorithmic kind of channeling, kind of, getting us in certain groups and pressing ideas and seeing how we respond. I mean, this is happening like split second AI kind of training algorithm decisions right now. I don't think we even fully grasp the level to which this is happening, and we've talked about this before.
It really is tough to fully grasp how this information can be used. I mean, like, I have a marketing degree, and if the extent of what Google was doing was trying to tailor make the AdSense ads so that if I know I'm looking to buy a new suit because I emailed somebody about it, then I get an ad for places that sell new suits, whatever. I could live with that, because of my marketing background. Wouldn't love it, but I could live with that. But it is now turned into them knowing what you're going to do before you do it. And you go, oh, that's crazy. That would never happen. And you start to read some of the papers of the technology that they have, and you go, oh my God, how is this happening? How is this true? I tell the story of my wife having a funny dream where she, in her dream, she woke me up. She was like, hey, I detailed our car, and she had taken her car and put Kansas City Chiefs stuffs all over the car in this dream for some reason. And she told me the dream, and I was like, that's crazy. And then she told her mom the story of the dream, and her mom laughed. And then like 2 days later, all the ads on her Facebook were decals and stickers for Kansas City Chiefs stuff for her car. And so she showed me that. I was like, yeah, they're listening to you, and they're doing all this, and it's really creepy. And and nobody appreciates it, but it's gone beyond that now.
Well, and it's also nudging decisions. Like, you may see, we notice that because it happens to connect. It's all the things you don't notice,
right?
All the imagery that you don't even think about that are infecting what you think about that day and what you want to buy later. So political, it's just, and this is not even getting into the digital twins overlap, which we've talked about as well. This is just algorithmic predictive models. Like, you overlap that with like the actual mapping out of your day-to-day actions that you've ever done your entire life since you were born that's been recorded, and then adding what we say right now to the real-time feed of what that thing does in its little Sim City. Those are very real and actually happening. It's like that's so far beyond what we can even think about, and that's, I'm of the mind that this is beyond, like, I mean, it's think about the world in which predictively they could, I forget the numbers, like high percentages decide what you may do next week on a Tuesday at 3 p.m. But what if it's gone beyond that and it quite literally is predictive at this point? Like, that's not that far-fetched to where it's like they could literally, and then what that does for a government and deciding what to buy and what to do and actions to take in the world. And now you're just literally gaming society. That's what I think they're trying to do. Maybe already there.
If you want to take some acid and read a Philip K. Dick book and think about all this, they may be just figuring out the best way to predict where you're going to be. So they only have to render your world in that little region and not render the rest of the universe for you, because you're in some deep simulation. You know what I mean? Like,
it gets so abstract that there's, especially for somebody like me, where I'm just like, okay, I mean, I am interested as hell by stuff like this. Like, it's even like you get into like the nanotech, and it's like some of that is pretty provable today, but it gets to a point where you're like, okay, it's like trying to discuss what's going on the moon. It's like, how do we ever think we can prove any, the experts say, it's like, you never really know. And so for that kind of stuff, I'm just like, what I do, I'm like, well, I'm just going to go to what I can prove today. And that's the best I can do.
Sure.
But it's like, that stuff seems very much like it's not just real, but it is going to have an immediate effect on our lives very soon, if not already, like you're saying.
And to be fair, just because it's not provable right now by you doesn't mean that it isn't actually happening. So,
exactly.
but we have to, and you and I have always been pretty good about differentiating between when we're talking about something we can prove and when we're speculating, because we have to. So it's fun to speculate, and there's a mysterious universe out there, and I don't pretend to know how it all works. And I wonder sometimes if they think they know how it all works, because when you start to hear things about Ronald Reagan bringing in astrologers and all that, and how billionaires are using astrologers, and you go, wait a second. All this stuff is kind of dismissed. I was dismissive of it, and it was very kooky. And then you start to look into it and you go, well, maybe there's a little more magic to this whole place than what we're led to believe. And of course, as I get older, I start to learn just about everything I was taught was a lie or something,
Right.
Everything becomes like
possible,
a possibility, so open to questioning, So I hope I never lose that. I hope I'm always sort of asking, like, what's going on over there?
You do this long enough, you realize very quickly that it's like, okay, if the moment that you close off your mind to any possibility is the moment you start to lose sight of, any number of things. Like I put it this way. It's amazing to me how many times I've gone through these things where it's something that I was not versed on, that I would have immediately dismissed in other parts of my life, where you come to find out that's quite literally what's happening, and you just kind of go, and if you had been like, oh, that's fake news, or, oh, that's something I'm supposed to believe is fake, you would have never even have been open to the possibility of the evidence that set you on that path. It's just ignorance, willful ignorance to do that. Learned helplessness. It is always within your power, But
yes.
Oh, good.
Well, part of what has happened in American culture is that this willful ignorance is somehow elevated proudly. It's like I don't know nothing and I'm proud of it. It's like, well, wait a second. Where's that intellectual curiosity to figure out how the world works? And I get offended when I think I'm being lied to. And I feel like the people on TV are lying to me and my politicians are lying to me. And I take it personally and get pissed off about it. Don't you? Well, and no,
I think it's cognitive dissonance. I think people
so.
Get uncomfortable by it, and or it undermines the team that they see themselves being on as a part of their identity. There's 100 different ways that people just kind of go, sadly, some of them that very much see it and choose to ignore it. But I think most are just people that are brushing up against it and just close down to it because they've been trained to in 1,000 different ways,
And don't stand out. Don't stand out from the herd. It's dangerous. The herd doesn't love it. You put a target on yourself, maybe, after you do that a couple times in life, sometimes you learn to just, not try to get out of the crab bucket. You try to pull everybody else down because you want them down there with you. So again, it goes back to like the psychology of people and how they see themselves. And what's been fascinating to me over the last couple of months has been this new, I don't know if it's a study or it was an article or something that came out talking about people with or without inner monologues. And I think that brought up a whole new thing where people were going, well, wait a second.
Do I have one?
Do you not have one? I have one. Do you not have one? Wait, and other people. So it was like what was it? The red dress, blue dress thing, or whatever. It was.
Yeah, or that
gold dress, blue dress.
There's always one of those every so many months or something. Yeah, but that's interesting though, because that would be pretty weird to suddenly realize that you are the other. Like what you guys do. Like what? That would be a pretty weird thing to realize that you're somehow different. But I would argue that really just comes down to an intelligence thing. Like maybe. Whether or not you're like, because look, frankly, you're probably much happier if you're just like literally like I think about this in my life in ways that I think I am unique. Like I think the reason I'm good at that I'm like kind of made for what I do here in this to a degree is that I have an ability to sort of, sometimes stuff sits with me, but kind of after get done work, just kind of focus on my garden or what I'm doing and just I'm present, and you find a peace in that you're not constantly just reviewing all the things in your mind. And if I wasn't capable of that, I feel like, this stuff which people I've known in this have just kind of burned out because it's too much, and I get it, but to somebody like that just you're always kind of focused on the current moment, that's probably pretty happy at the end of the day.
Envious. There's a lot of, there's a lot of this stuff that it's like, You want to know, because you want to know what's out there, and you want to know where the potholes are in life, so you can avoid them. And you need to get educated on the health industry because it impacts you and things like that. But a lot of this stuff, like, I'm just curious. Why do I want to know? I just want to know how it all works, man. I don't know. I don't have any sort of like idea that I'm going to fix it all. And so I in some respects, I think that's sort of helped to be a little bit detached and not be like so associated with one team or the other. Because if you do that, you'll be constantly disappointed in the behavior of your group. Your group will let you down over and over again. But if you can somehow remove yourself, and I've had to do this in my language as well, when I talk about what we're doing in the Middle East, and I have to go, no, I'm not doing any of this. I have to reframe that. So part of it is like even allowing myself to get retrained on the language so that I'm not enabling them. I'm not including myself in their war crimes just because I was born here. I don't have to sign on to all their insanity.
And we all fall in that too. We all, it's kind of, it's just a language thing. It's very simple, but you're right. I mean, how aggressively I make that point, I still often go, basically end up conflating the government and the American people. It's very important to me, like the government did this. We did not, the country did not do this. The government did that, very important difference there. But let's talk about some of this two-party, like there's a couple things I want to get into to like the latter half of this is, let's talk about the kind of, we'll start with the point they're making about the No Kings rally, but let's just talk about the, left-wing terror, two-party illusion, the weird kind of building alarming divide about Antifa and like how, and I think neither of us, and I'll let you speak to this, but neither of us, I would argue, are of the mind that, like there is a level of Antifa organization. You can't deny that. And whether there are groups that are just doing these things that I wouldn't argue are part of some massive funded thing. There's also organized elements of political movement that aren't necessarily terrorism, whether or not they're being funded by billionaires or not. It's a very, very alarming thing that they're doing right now. And it benefits the government over all Americans, but also the overlap with that around, lacking accountability. And then how that kind of ties in, I want to touch on at least the end about Israel and the weirdness around how all this seems to connect. But I'll bring this up. This is what I was looking at. I just kind of set it in my mind. Ted Cruz says, this is today, or yesterday, excuse me, there's considerable evidence that George Soros and his networks are funding the No Kings rallies. Probably. I sure as hell would like to see that evidence that they love to say and never seem to be able to verify. But here's the interesting thing to start on, and then you take it wherever you want, is that, would it be, well, it's not illegal for anyone, including a billionaire, to fund political action. That's just simply the reality. But when does it become terrorism? And have they made this line? And I think I would clearly argue that George Soros is a problem when it comes to the way these things work. Just like I think Elon Musk, in the same exact way on the other side of the conversation, or many others like that, can be manipulative and to the point where it becomes illegal. But the way it's being used right now, especially without proving it, I just think it's a trap. And I think that's where it's going. So what do you think about all this?
Well, I think that we're in some dangerous territory here with the Antifa side of things, because there is a temptation to want to say that's a domestic terrorist organization. But because of course they are, right? But when you do that, you then you've made them, it's a legal designation. They're now a domestic terrorist operating in the homeland on the battlefield. And so they can get black bagged and taken away. And you go, yay, we got Antifa off the street. And then the election comes and Gavin Newsom becomes president. And then that power is normalized and in the hands of that lunatic, who, by the way, is no better than Donald Trump, of course, just a different flavor of insanity. Right. But then they will weaponize that and you go, oh, look at the Proud Boys. They're all a domestic terrorist organization operating in the homeland on the battlefield. And so they get rounded up and taken away. And so anything that this is the important part I want the right side, the conservative side, to remember, is that any of these powers that you grant to your guy will be given to the other guy eventually and used against you. So just be very careful about what you're supportive of when it comes to this, because, it's Antifa today, right? But it's you guys tomorrow. And if you remember back in 2015, 2016, the Jade Helm simulation exercise, one of the things that they were simulating was they were looking for enemy combatants, domestic terrorists. And what were they looking for specifically? Constitutionalists was what the guy was talking about. So you can just envision how this would be used. And that, unfortunately, is the problem that like a lot of these people get to, is they can't think I don't need you to think 10 steps ahead. Just think one step ahead. Just one more. Mm-hmm. The power that is granted to your favorite politician will be given to your enemy in 4 years or 8 years or whatever. And it will most definitely be used against you, and it will be worse, because then they will be coming for revenge.
That's what's happening now, it seems.
Right.
Like it's like it's an always continuing tit for tat kind of escalation between, but I don't know if I think that the individual parties are, like, I'm of the mind that most of them are very aware of the lack of real division. But my thing is that, that is always the most important thing to start with, is that even if you think everything they're doing is right, it's going to end up, and if you think that's a problem that the other side will use it back, well, then that should show you that what you're doing is wrong. Simple, right? Just really know it's wrong if it's wrong. It's not only right, or it's not. The idea is that they frame it as, well, they are the good guy fighting the bad guy, so it's okay. The other side's the other way around. So even though in principle it's the same, there's no logic to it.
Right, but the other side will frame them as the good guys and you as the bad guys. So so it'll all come back on you, and that is the state. That's what the state does, and the state loves this. They have a monopoly on violence. They love violence. They love Antifa. Don't kid yourself that they're like, oh, this is terrible. This gets things done. These are color revolutions. We've been doing this in Europe for 50 years. I mean, it's extremely effective. You put a little bit of money behind some events. To me though, like the idea, the No Kings rally, from a branding messaging standpoint, I think, well, if there was a king, would he allow these protests? Probably not, right? If we had an actual king, he'd stomp these protests out. So the fact that you're having a protest called No Kings, sort of by itself, sort of an admission that there aren't really actually kings, because you wouldn't be able to have the protest.
You could make the argument that that's the point, is that we're protesting there shouldn't be kings, and that's where it's going. We both agree that that's where the power continues to consolidate. But let's be clear. In no way am I saying that I think that look, it's politically manipulated. It's politically motivated. There's no way around it. It's about politics. What's funny is we've gotten to a point to where now being politically motivated is somehow inherently of like underlying criminality. Like it can be for sure. But the reality is all they're really doing from both sides is framing any kind of political momentum as somehow being a terrorist underlying problem. That applies both ways, guys. Like Charlie was saying in the beginning, like, I'm not going to argue that you can clearly see, like, let's just make it again a broad point. A Soros or just another faceless billionaire that decides to come in and spend money to fund a group and to get new signs and whatever else. Is that a crime? It's not a crime, period, right? It can amount to more of a criminal activity when you do something beyond that, like especially when it comes to more manipulative actions, but just being able to fund that is not a crime. So it's interesting because we see it happen both ways. But so I understand the way that's manipulated, though. I know, as we can see, one more step back, actually. What we're talking about here from their side is the conflation of people protesting, no matter where funded from and how highly funded and organized, with Antifa as a terrorist organization committing violence. You see that that's the illusion right there they're creating, is they're going, well, now anytime we can prove, let's say Soros funded something, of course, only going from one side, as we all know, if you're paying attention, it's both sides of the paradigm do this, that then you say that is now the violence and we can shut down their protests. Yeah. I just think it's so clear to me how this is being manipulated. Now, I think additionally, we know, and we've talked about, that the FBI will front us these things. Like, so what's crazy is that they're trying to go after using this people just on the left. That's what's so crazy to me. And I'm not even going after politicians, just random people out there protesting, some of which are just people who believe what they're doing. We know that is a part of this, just like it happens on both sides. And so all you're doing is creating this error where they are, if they're wearing black and have a mask on, let's say, or just look like a lefty, therefore now it's some kind of terrorism. And we Patriot Front is the same thing on both sides of it. But the other thing is, like you mentioned, that MAGA, to your point in the beginning point, this is where it's swinging back around. There are people right now going, just wait until we declare MAGA a terrorist organization. Some pretty prominent accounts, by the way. What happens then? Well, then they're going to make the same argument, like we said, that now if you're MAGA, you're part of an organized terrorist network. And they're going to go, we know it, and we're the ones doing it right. And, and all you do is build both sides of that problem. But I think the real core here is how they're using this, even if it's based on truth. In many cases, it can be, and it has been, about organized manipulation to the case of violence or political subversion. The point is that now they're framing it as literally everything that happens, and whether they can even prove that Soros funded it, whether they can even prove that individual protests are part of that organized network to begin with, or just people protesting who call themselves anti-fascist. You know what I'm saying? It's so clearly lacking of the principle. But I know I get pushback from people who just want to go, but Ryan, we know the left, X, Y, and Z. You can't fight that. You know, people in my audience feel that way. I just think it's so obvious how this is being played against us, and it's only going to amount to less rights and more manipulation, you know?
Well, if the Antifa had history classes, they would learn about the brown shirts, and the brown shirts had ended very poorly for them as the SS was grown as a parallel organization and then eventually turned on the brown shirts and wiped them out. And that is, of course, what Antifa's role is. They're the group that comes in and starts the chaos to create the pretext for the revolution. But
you mean that like in like the FBI overlap sense?
Yeah. Come in and be the chaos agents. But then after you've after you've had the revolution, those guys become a liability, not an asset.
Right.
Then they go up against the wall, as Bezmenov says, and they're shot, because that's their only function, is to create chaos early on, so that they create the justification for his rise to power. But once you're in power, we don't need you. You're going to be a big problem because you're clearly easily whipped up into a frenzy. So we'll just get rid of all those people. That's Antifa. They don't understand their history, so they don't know where this is going to go. And listen, there is a genuine reason for people to be frustrated. That's the part about this that makes it all kind of, in a way, legitimate, because it's like, if everything was fine and people were protesting, it would stand out like a sore thumb. You would think, this is weird. Things are great. Why are you guys out here? This feels very artificial. But because things are bad, and because people are genuinely frustrated, and for a variety of reasons, financially, socially, whatever, they're either for the migrants or against them, whatever. They're angry about everything. And of course, they've been weaponized. Like, now is the time that an Antifa-backed, a Soros-backed group like this could easily pull something off, because there's already sort of a underlying atmosphere of revolution, sort of, like there's a lot of people that are kind of, now whether they'll do anything about it, I don't know. I mean, I think so many people have been neutered, but there's a frustration, and it's on both sides too.
Yeah. But don't you see the problem with the, like, okay, so I think we'd agree the principle is the point, right? So if somebody breaks the law, present the evidence, charge them with a crime. I think it's very simple. Like, the game of going, you're a domestic terror. It's the point is, if there's criminal activity, they don't need some larger some way to broaden out the context and be like, well, you're next to that person and you chanted the right thing, so you're part of the network. It's alarming to see how this is being played. I'm not disagreeing with anybody here, and anybody in the chat, about the reality of how this can be used and subversively to manipulate this country. The point is, when we allow them to point to the thing they're in part creating, like you're saying, to rationalize the next steps, we're digging our own grave. Right. And I think we just need to be very clear about the fact that you can have people out there and they break a window, they come, and even if you can prove, and I mean with evidence, not in saying it online, that there is a network organized effort. They're online going, we got this funding, let's go out and break all these windows, or the plan was to plant a bomb, then present the evidence and charge them. But outside of that, it becomes this abstract catch-all argument where they can apply it to literally anybody, just like they did against the right when it was the other way around, and we weren't of the mind that everybody in a red hat was a terrorist, because it's a stupid thing to say. Just like not everyone in a black shirt and a mask is a terrorist, or any of them for that matter. It just seems so easy to recognize how this will be used against us. And so when we frame it as like, that they are this or they are that, it's the same as we were talking about as saying the government or we, it's like, the reality is there are people that are doing things, and we need to prove that and charge them with a crime. Everything else is the government taking advantage, in my opinion.
American Al-Qaeda, just put together this database of pop-up agitators that just are, some of them are on the government payroll, some of them are there for the party. Unfortunately, we're now in a digital era where, regardless of what your intentions or how you feel about an event, if you're just actually there, your signal is being picked up by the flock cameras and the
These
Reaper drones
that
and
ICE is using against Republicans. Yeah.
You know, you're getting all of this, or you go to the Charlie Kirk funeral and all your info is picked up by Israel, or you go to the Christian churches and all that's some partnership deal where all your cell phone info is being tracked by, you know, so we're in this weird data collection where, are you a part of Antifa? No. Well, how do you prove that you were at the event? It's like, we're just going to ping your cell phone. And then that gets into some weird dystopian tech fantasy for these people where they start making associations based on where you are. And of course, that'll be very wildly inaccurate, of course, but I think that might even be part of the equation. But to say, well, you were there, you know, like we determined the pre-crime, you know, we've seen the pre-crime coming.
Just like January 6th.
Yeah.
You know, it's all the same game. You know, that's why I just really need conservatives of all to recognize how, you know, what a lot of them are doing. And I get the feeling of, you know, one, revenge, like you were just saying, or of going after what appears to be obviously a manipulated problem, but don't take the bait. Right? Don't turn around and do the same thing where you start subjectively arguing that anybody there, you know, look, being part of whatever they decide to call a terrorist group, you know, it's this. Look, if they turn around and declared MAGA terrorist group, the argument legally would be that you are now a terrorist because you are associated with that, not because you ever committed a crime. It's arbitrary, and it's exactly what the government can do about anything, like they've done about groups that they've literally funded and used against us throughout the world. So I just want to stress again that what they're doing with this is subjective, not to say that there's not provable evidence, but if they had that, they should present that and charge people individually with crimes. They're laying out a broad argument and then just going after people, by the way, who interestingly happen to be the same group that overlaps with people protesting against Israel for Palestine. What a coincidence. As Israel floods us with this information and floods us with, I mean, it's undeniable. You know, I don't know. I'm of the mind that that is a harder point right there for conservatives to identify, because even conservatives that see a lot of the things we talk about are still, you know, maybe of the mind that the left is the problem kind of thing. But I just don't know how we don't recognize that when most of them do see Israel, and we can recognize the manipulation therein. You know, how Palantir and ICE is not being used just against immigrants or even just against the left. You know, we're building the cage around us, you know, and I'd like to believe that more people out there can recognize how easy it is to use something like we started with, especially if it's built on the truth, like going after Antifa. You know, like, do you think they're going to arrest George Soros? I don't. And they're going to say that, you know, so that's the kind of the crux of the point. If they keep yelling George Soros and yet pick up a random kid with purple hair who's not even part of anything, just wearing a black shirt, you know, that's clearly not what, you know. I'll say the last thing. You out there listening, if you believe I'm wrong, I could be. You show me when they get an organized, like something is charged. Here's our RICO case. Here's how we can prove the actual organized effort, not just individuals they're claiming happen to be wearing a Palestinian flag. You know, I argue you're going to recognize quickly, if you focus on that it's never been about what they're claiming, just like it wasn't when it came to the right.
They're not going to arrest George Soros. He's their partner with USAID and National Endowment for Democracy. He's been doing regime change operations for them internationally for 30 years. He's their man, or at least since the early 2000s. He's their man.
Yep.
You know,
I agree.
He's not going to jail, but they'll make a spectacle of it because they know how to. You know, they love the chaos of it all, because in the aftermath of that, they can come and crack down on everybody and not, you know. So yeah, I hope the MAGA people can see this. It's kind of important. It's kind of important to recognize this. You don't want to walk into any traps. Again, like just a reminder that what has been done, where when the government is using its force to go after the people that you want them to go after.
Right.
It's tempting to be enthusiastic about that. But you just have to understand that this is they're a soulless monster, the government. And they will turn on you. You cannot reason with them. You can't sit them down and explain it all away. And this is why parents tell kids, like early on, good parents tell kids early on, don't talk to the cops.
Right.
You're not going to go and explain it and make everything better. You're going to make everything, just don't do that. And so same thing. Don't interact with your government. Don't go to these, don't walk into these traps. These are obvious. The J6, you mentioned that J6. I get it. You're angry. There's plenty of reasons to be angry. You want your voice to be heard, and all of that, and you think that in a big group maybe that'll get your point across, and CNN won't be able to pretend like you're not there. I understand all that, but like, you have to think like the way they think. This is all intelligence driven. They're going to be they're going to be gathering info on you. You're walking into a trap, and whether it's J6 or the next one that comes, because there will be a reason, and there'll be something that will happen, as we know, that will get everybody whipped up into a frenzy, demanding something be done. Just be careful about these problem, reaction, solution scenarios where we get into, where you start shaking your fist at the sky, demanding some solution that you would have never thought of years ago. And then you go, how did I even get here?
Right.
And you just get walked in, as David Icke says, the totalitarian tiptoe. You just kind of slowly walked yourself into it.
Right.
And, but awareness is just a massive key in this the whole time. As soon as you're aware that you're being watched, or you're aware that this is going on, it changes your perception of reality, and it puts you in a position to be less impacted by this. So to the extent that you can be paying attention and grab those people near you and say, hey, this is what I see. You might want to check it out. You know how it is. You can't reach everybody. There's even some of your closest friends, there's just a wall there. But for those who have the eyes to see it or the ears to hear it, like, we have to get this information out to people, because it would be a damn shame if somebody did something stupid because they got whipped up into a frenzy over some manufactured event that could have easily avoided.
Yeah. And I argue that's, in a large way how these things tend to happen. The random people that do actually get kind of just worked up, through psychological manipulation, through pro-war material, through antidepressants, and, whatever else happens. And I think that it's, there are cases where I think these things are used like that, but I also agree that I believe that there are things that are organized too. But let's finish with a few points. And finish with talking about, the Israel overlap, but I'll include this for what we were just saying. This is random account Jack, 153,000 followers, saying, what the F? Shocking report reveals Mexican cartels are teaming up with left-wing terror networks inside the United States. This is guys, play 1, 2, and 3. I don't think our government truly knows how to recreate. This is just another angle of the same kind of tropes they've been using. For all we know, it's real. I'm saying the idea is like every other repackaged idea of foreign policy and everything. This is the same old style the government always uses. They're offering massive cash bounties for the assassination of top border officials. Now, I would love to see any kind of evidence that can prove this actual that we can, the left wings terror arming, working with cartels. What I think it probably stems back to is the obvious reality that the U.S. government has always worked with these cartels, including literally from August of this year. The DEA got caught laundering $19 million of cartel drug money into cash and crypto, and even helped cover up that it happened. Nobody cares about this. Patel's out there. No one's above the law, or we're going after the drug cartels and their poison while supporting vaccines and ignoring this story. Just, it's funny. And then on what quick overlapping note, the DHS, remember the big raid with all the helicopters in Chicago, and they came down from the zip lines. It turns out that only one person that has a connection to Tren de Aragua, and that's it. If that, ultimately provable. They came in saying everybody in the entire building was Tren de Aragua. There's just so many lies swirling around all of this. And on accountability, Eric Dougherty simply says, Kash Patel announces the location of 5,400 children victims of criminals. The location? FBI's found located all these children. I've heard these kind of weird claims a bunch of times. What I think is funny is, even if he did good, that's good. I'm glad it happened. But I feel it's weird. There's a lot of these kind of statements that never seem to be backed up with anything. But then, of course, most people going, good. Where's the Epstein list? And I think it's funny. Good.
Did 5,400 children, did you arrest anybody?
Exactly where I was going. Right, exactly. That never happened. I'll point out Jones on the 23rd talking about his big insights coming from the DOJ about everybody being wrapped up and marched away, and back in 2024 doing the same thing about Klaus Schwab and Gates and everybody else, if we can keep Trump alive, or this Patel for the 45th time since he's been in this position, talking about how Nancy Pelosi is a terrorist and Obama is a criminal, and James Comey. It turns out, by the way, neither of James Comey or Letitia James seem like they're actually going to be held accountable, because the cases seem to be completely set up to fail. I just want to lay that out there, how ridiculous it is that there's so much manipulation going on. And then I wanted to end with just talking about Israel. I've got points we can get into, but if you have any comments on all that, because I think this overlapping. I think what's crazy is that we can see that the two-party illusion is always kind of driving us into a place where we're trying to pick sides. Right now, I've never seen more of a flimsy stance from this. I just don't know why anybody trusts these people right now. It blows me away.
No, it's tough. It's tough to take them seriously, but also I feel like this is end of empire behavior. It feels like they're stealing everything that isn't bolted down. The insanity is running rampant. It feels very disjointed, end of fourth turning-esque. We have financial situations that are like blinking red indicators, like gold going through the roof, silver at all-time highs, all these things, everything kind of happening at once. It feels a little disorienting in a sense. So you kind of don't know where to. If you're a finance guy, of course you focus on the finance stuff, but if you're like you and I did, we sort of cover a little bit of everything. I'm having a hard time prioritizing.
Yeah, I agree.
What I think is the most important, because obviously the technocracy is creeping, and that's one of those things that if they lock the door, you're locked in there for good, and that's a huge problem. So that to me feels like the priority. But then I look in and I see the social engineering happening, and I go, "Oh, we got to get a handle on this." And then the Frankenfoods are out there, and I go, "Well, maybe hang on a second.
Right.
Food is the most important thing. We're all going to be eating poison if we don't focus on this, and maybe the technocracy will collapse. But we're definitely going to need the food." So it feels like there's a lot. To quote Alex Jones, it's all happening. But in this case, it might actually be.
Yeah. Right. But he's been right. He's just, now that it actually starts, he doesn't talk about it. That's fantastic. But yeah,
you've been screaming about it all happening forever. It's finally happening. Can we talk about it?
But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's hard to. I mean, for me, I think I'll speak for myself. I mean, the most live stream genocide, if not the largest in time. I mean, everything about this is the biggest and most alarming thing I've ever seen in my life. And I don't even know how we can even argue that there's anything else anywhere, not individually, like, from an American perspective, but just in a global sense. But yet I then, like you're saying, I'm like, okay, as an American broadcasting, I've talked about what's going on there a lot, and I'm going to continue to. It's like, I try to is this more important today to focus on this move and the technocratic, agenda and how it does connect Israel? Every day I go through that, which is very difficult to think about, on top of the fact that when I lay out everything, it's like, okay, that's an 18-hour show. I can't do that today. It's like, I have to think about how I'm going to organize this. So it becomes this game. I hate to even call it that, where you're what horrible important thing am I going to put off today? It kills me every day. Yeah.
For us, at least, it's not lies by omission. We're not leaving them out because we're trying to manipulate. It's like,
I talk about it the next show,
Yeah. We're going to get to it. Yeah. It's just that I can't do it right now. I can't talk about that in this very moment, because we're trying to put out another fire over here, or we're trying to raise awareness of an issue that we think needs massive attention now because it's early on and something can be done about it. And so we're focusing on the technocracy. Does that not mean that we're worried about the vaccines? I'm definitely worried about that. And then, as you mentioned, the crazy part is how it all interlocks anyway. I mean, you could only focus on the technocracy and still wind up in the vaccine area,
right?
Because of how you get there through everything that they're doing with mRNA. And so it's just, in some respects, overwhelming. But I suppose the best thing to do for us is to just remember, take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of the people close to you, the people you can reach. Be proactive in everything that you do, because you'll feel like you're doing something. It's easy to feel kind of helpless when there's all this bad news and you feel like, what am I going to do about it? Well, take care of you. It sounds a little selfish, but take care of the things that are controllable for you. Do you have storable food? Just get that and cross it off your list. You feel like you're on your way towards doing things. Get your money out of the bank, or reevaluate that relationship with the bank and start doing the things that you should be doing now. And in doing that, and in being proactive in that regard, you start to feel less helpless and more like, well, I mean, it's coming, but at least I'm prepared in these aspects of my life. And I'm not wishing it to come, but I've got my money out of the bank because I know that they can steal it, and I know that they probably will. I just don't know what day that'll be. So, just things like that. So, so to people who are feeling a bit overwhelmed by it all, like, I get it. It's, I feel a bit overwhelmed sometimes by it all too. But when you really stop and think about, like, what is controllable, what can you do? Like, there's some low hanging fruit items that you can take care of for yourself. And in doing that, you'll feel like you're at least on the path towards fixing things. Cause it sometimes feels like all this stuff is unfixable.
Well, as always, we talk about, I mean, this is just my opinion, but I think it's pretty clear that it's a reaction to people seeing things that they haven't called out before. It is a positive moment as much as it feels really uncomfortable. We think people are starting to recognize long hidden truths. How is that not a positive thing? Or the fact that what we're doing every single day, despite it's insurmountable almost in a lot of ways, the amount of resources and what they have to use against us, and whether it's censorship or suppression or algorithms and AI or lawsuits, and yet we're still breaking through.
Yeah.
That's pretty profound when you think about it. But, before we wrap in general, and we tend to kind of aim for about an hour. If you have any thoughts on, you want to get into Israel for a minute, or do you want to touch on it next time?
Yeah, okay. No, let's do that, because I put an episode of Macroaggressions that came out yesterday called Not Enough Money in the World. And I told people in advance, like, I'm unhinged in this one, but I've got receipts, and it's not for nothing, right? I'm coming in hot on this one. I was pretty angry when I recorded that. I had seen, just another nonsensical press conference where they told us not to believe our eyes about what we're seeing out there. And it just was it just hit me so hard. I've been working on this episode and I've been putting together all the stats, all the facts that I need to present. But from an emotional side, I just was shot out of a cannon in it. Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of people get back to me and say, there you go. That was nice to see. I bet that felt good, but it doesn't feel good. I wish I didn't have to do it. I wish I didn't have to think about this stuff. I don't want to be right about it. I don't want to be, I don't want these people to be suffering in Gaza. I don't want this to be happening to them. I want to, I can't pretend like I don't see it.
Yeah.
I refuse to do that. And so here you go. And there it is. And so for those who are interested, again, this is not a new story, but sometimes you just get, it just makes you emotional.
How can it not?
It feels so empty because it's such it doesn't, I can't do anything, and it's hard.
Yeah. Well, anybody that genuinely, it's, for, I think most people, I'd like to believe, who genuinely care about, have some kind of compassion. It's, especially I would argue from what, we're in a position where, at least to some degree, you can have an influence on how people see things, you can affect the conversation. And so it also comes along with a feeling of that you're failing them too, and I know what you mean. And it's not like it's putting us above, it's a minor thing in the comparison to what these people are dealing with. But, it's like every day you see that you can prove it. And it's like maybe I could have done a little bit more. I could have pushed a little harder. Maybe, it's like but we're doing what we can. It's just so disgusting that we're in a world where we have everything in front of us and you literally can prove what's happening. And the power structure is so broken and so tainted and so completely dismantled that they either don't care or aren't allowed to care. It's a very difficult situation, but I'll point this one out, by the way, I think is interesting, is I absolutely do. I thought it to begin with. I think at this point, it's overwhelmingly clear, in my opinion, based on the evidence, that this is very much connected to Israel. But just want to point out that teacher in Franklin, by the way, teacher suspended over Charlie Kirk post. And you can read about this. It is quite literally, let me just find it real quick to make the point. This is what she said on her post. So basically, Charlie Kirk had said in a previous post that it was worth it that people had been killed by guns because it's a God-given right. It's important. I think it's a valid statement. You can make a decision what you think is worth more or not. I don't think it's even insulting. He's simply saying that people will die and it's important, whatever. But I also argue Charlie Kirk did say things that I would argue were, whatever. I don't agree with everything. But she says, don't worry, y'all, after he got shot. It's worth it. It's rational. It's prudent that I have to go through regular drills of practicing how I will save the lives of students, practice backpacking gunshot wounds, pressure kids. When they get shot at, I'll be there to protect them. And then it says, don't mourn his death, she wrote. It's just a piece of doing business, completely rational. That's what so look, this is what's so crazy to me. Is that insulting to some people? Yes. Do you find that to be tasteless maybe at the timing? Sure. But to argue in any way as a public school, which means government, that she could be removed from her job, which would be a violation of her First Amendment because she said something that insulted you. Guys, that you're the snowflake, you're the broflake on the right at this point. It's outrageous to me, And I'll just list some of these points and we can just talk about all of them at the end. You pointed this out, which I think is important. Supporting and standing with Israel, this pastor said, is America first. I can't believe people are still putting this out there. And as you said, nobody's more delusional than Christian Zionists. This person's griping about the fact that CNN frames that Israel started this war, which, as you said, they did. It's just wild, the grappling with this. The Qatari airbase, they're now trying to pretend isn't real, even though you can prove that it is. All straight crazy stuff. Trump and Gavin Newsom want you to believe Jen Esco writes that they are different, but both are slaves to the Israel lobby, because they are. It just is very clear. I talked about right now, and this is hopefully we can get into a little bit, is what's happening in Gaza and the lying of the false ceasefire, and the fact that the way I see it now, Netanyahu is aiming to use these ISIS-linked gangs, which are discussed within their Knesset. It's very provable. They've publicly discussed this. ISIS-linked gangs that have been the ones stealing food for the entire time. Maybe other people too, but you can prove this. Or GHF lines where they've been shooting people who are coming for food. Now they're the ones literally out there executing people or being executed by Hamas, and they frame it as Hamas killing everybody in Gaza. Very weird. Oh, just daily reminder that this American, third generation American from Florida is still in prison in Israel, has been for 8 months now. Anyway, just want to get those out there for people to remember. But, where we are right now with this is really, really wild. That it's about a left-right thing somehow, even though Israel's been manipulating all of our government and all of our country for quite a long time and is now, I guess, allowing us to, how do you read what's going on with the ceasefire? Let's just start there.
Oh, well, of course, you can't trust ceasefires. I'm in favor of peace. So I'll take a ceasefire, even if it's a fake one, for as long as we can have it.
If it actually stops it, but
if it actually stops things, then you get the reports that it doesn't, And listen, it's a one-way ceasefire because it's not like the Palestinians are at this point fighting back in the way that's comparable to the Israelis. This is let's please stop the murder. I'm in favor of that.
Yeah.
And you know what? If it gets people to stop dying, give Donald Trump whatever he wants.
I would agree with that.
Things I don't care. He's such an egomaniac. That prize has zero value to me. The people that they gave that peace prize to Henry Kissinger for stopping the Vietnam War in 1973. The war didn't end until 75.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's been a worthless award for a long time. So, but I don't trust the Israelis to actually stop. We know what they want to do. A ceasefire is not in their best interest. It's not what they want. They will eventually find a way to break it, and
they already are in technical ways.
Yeah, if you're right. So I don't. I don't go to bed saying, "Thank God that thing's been solved." Thank God Donald Trump went there and wrapped it all up. Now nobody will die anymore. I don't obviously believe any of that.
That has to be one of the most frustrating parts in all of this is how many people, like Ben Shapiro level, including Ben Shapiro, that came out and been like, all you people calling for ceasefire, why are you so silent right now? And as they're posting that, I can prove that Israel was bombing and killing people in Gaza, or that they were doing any number of other things that clearly violated, like the closing of Rafah, or the restricting of food, or, kidnapping Palestinians and posting it on Instagram, and yet they're out there going, why aren't, on top of the fact that it's not even actually an end, it's only a ceasefire. And on top of that, it's like, it just kills me that that's what they're doing and acting like somehow you just got what you wanted. Or saying that's an end to the war. But I'm with you. Give him that. I don't care if it actually stops this. But I think we can clearly prove, just like last time, that Israel is intent already showing you that they are not going to stop this. They already said that they're going to force Hamas to disarm, even though Trump had already told them and within the deal that they were allowed to rearm for a period of time. And they're sort of using that confusion to act like they're violating it right now. It's all so disgusting, man. And people are still suffering as usual.
Yeah. It's been a gross stain on humanity the last couple of years to watch this. But if anything good comes out of it, and it's not going to be much compared to the devastation there, but if anything good does come out of this, it will be that there is not enough money in the world for Israel to fix this public relations mess.
Oh yeah. That's long. That's over,
It's over for them. Yeah. They're done forever. Okay. For as long as we remember, for our lifetimes.
Yeah.
And they've made a serious miscalculation with the younger demographics. The generation. Those guys are gone. They're not coming back. They've memeified you. They've turned you into a joke. It's over for you.
Did you
so
see
there's boomers. We've got what? Right-leaning boomers that are supportive of it. I mean,
make some. Yeah, not even all of them.
They're all quadruple jabbed. So how much longer are they going to be around? If Israel was a stock, you would be shorting it.
Yeah, I mean, well, and you've seen the Republican, the $7,000 funding, like the very public discussion of Netanyahu saying that. Like, at what point did that just become a public relations engagement? Like, it's wild to me. Maybe he didn't think that was going to be recorded and put out. I mean, I don't know. It's pretty wild. But then you get those people like that Xavier guy going out. Did you see that he literally put the Israeli flag over the American flag? That was pretty widely shared. I just don't even understand. I mean, but this is why I argue that most conservatives, and I truly do believe this, well, maybe take your thought again, we bring this up every time, are actually seeing through this right now. I think that's pretty easy to prove. What do you think?
They've lost a lot of conservatives.
Yeah,
they've lost a lot, and it's been and look, I mean, for some people, it's been Israel's behavior on the battlefield, if you can call it that. And some of it has been Israel's behavior in the church, and with the Christian Zionism component of this. And they're starting to see their religious, the Christian religious leaders with huge followings like Pastor Greg Locke, talk about Israel in a very unnatural way that feels almost like blink twice if you're being held against your will sort of stuff. But then you realize how much money's flowing in, and you realize there's probably more money than anything, that this guy maybe actually believes it. So they're losing the PR war on the battlefield, of course. They're losing it in social media. It's a catastrophe there. And then they're losing it in the church. And then, of course, some of these kind of blur together, and the people who are in church are on social media, and they're showing these videos saying, look at this, get a load of this guy. He's out of his mind talking about this. Kenneth Copeland, take a look at this lizard person guy. He's going on and on about this or that. And, and so people are starting to ask questions, and, and Israel's trying to prevent them from getting the answers they don't want. But this is just a case study in Streisand effect. You just can't, and the funniest component of it is that they turned the $7,000 thing into a meme that is funny, even if the person isn't taking Israeli money, right? So it works either way. If they are taking it, it's a shaming of 7,000. If it's just somebody who just happens to have a pro-Israel opinion, then you go in the comment section and it's like 7,000, 7,000. That is hilarious. That is tough for them to come back from. They're like, no, but I wasn't thinking. It's like, it doesn't matter. I
thought you were going to take it the other direction. I thought, what I've seen is, and I think this is even better, is so, basically the point is, you're being paid 7,000, you can prove it. Over here, you're going, well, you're doing it for free, moron. Like,
right. Yeah, there's that. There's that. Like, for it. Boy, yeah. Because you can cook them either way. You can cook them for being too stupid to take the 7,000, or you can cook them for taking the 7,000. Either way, it's bad. And that's what they've found, is that they've angered the Reddits, the Redditors out there. And once you do that, they'll turn you into a joke. And then it's like quicksand. The more you struggle, the more they pile on, and that you just can't win this. So, and of course, nobody's going to, nobody, and it's not like everybody just woke up one morning and decided to be mean to Israel too. They're murdering women and children by the tens of thousands.
And then laughing about it on social media.
And there is plenty of reasons to be upset about this. So it's, I really sort of thought, I remember when I wrote my Octopus of Global Control book in 2017, or I put it out in 2017, I have 2 chapters in there about Israel. And I remember thinking, like, this is edgy. You know what I mean? Now I look back and I think, boy, like, how irrelevant would the book have been if I didn't have that in there? You know, because it would have just been a huge blind spot. But I saw it back then, and it's only gotten worse, or more pronounced, I should say, or more out in the open. And it was annoying back then, because it's like, oh, you feels like they want to manipulate us so that we'll be more favorable to Israel. Well, I get it. The Chinese probably want to do the same thing. Oh, yeah. But it's turned into something now where it's like, no, we want you to go in front of the American people and tell them they don't see what they're seeing. And it's like, when you do that, when you're asking people to not see a genocide, I suppose if you allow yourself to be blinded to that, boy, man, I don't know. I don't have much respect for you. I think that it's been a wake up call to a lot of people. And as the old Navajo proverb goes, you cannot wake a person who is pretending to be asleep.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. I mean, I think, and that's the most apt, like right where we are, where people are, I mean, I guess even though you could frame that as that people are choosing to believe that they're asleep when you can clearly tell that they're faking it. It's like there's so many people out there who are showing themselves to be, I mean, look, like you said, you could either argue that they just aren't incapable of seeing this, which is more than enough to be like, I should never listen to this guy ever again, or they're choosing to hide it, which is, I mean, disgusting. I mean, there's not even words to grapple. Like the idea of not discuss, it's just, there's so far over the top. And I think this speaks to the much larger point of all of what's been happening with Zionism. And what this was post October 7th was their miscalculation to a deadly effect. I mean, very much so, that they thought that they could go, we're going to finish this year, and really what they did was shoot themselves in both feet. And now there's no putting that genie back in the bottle, and Americans are calling it out. And now our government is punishing us for it. Is what it feels like to me,
It certainly does. It certainly does. It feels like our government is punishing us for noticing what's been going on with them the whole time. How dare you?
Yep.
How dare you call this out? Yeah.
Well, obviously because they're culpable, right? They're literally criminal. What they're doing is either or maybe blackmailed and threatened, which maybe they would feel internally that's not their fault. But either way, they all seem to have a weirdness around Epstein, around Israel, and I mean, we should be objective and say maybe it's not exactly what I think, but it speaks for itself. It is obvious, guys. And I know we all see it. All I'm doing every time is calling on people to stand up and call it out, make it clear for people that next to you that, I see it too. You're not crazy. We all recognize this. And just, it's about government power. That's all it really comes down to, but I think that let's end with one point, just asking you, like with this point and overlapping around the Qatari air base, which I very much think is just more of an extension of Israel's agenda, quite frankly. Where do you see that right now in regard to, let's just say, Israel's influence on U.S. policy? Where do you feel that is the line is at right now? Which is our opinion, by the way, completely.
I think whatever Israel wants, the American government does. I really just don't.
I agree.
I just don't know if there's much room between the two of them. They seem pretty interlocked, be that because they actually have some ideological overlap, which they do, or because they're captured in some way. But I don't see much daylight between the American foreign policy and the Israeli foreign policy, or anything having, I guess that would technically be domestic policy of Qatari Air Base here. But that, I could envision a scenario where Netanyahu says, that's not going to happen. or, like, we're not, you guys aren't doing that. Come on now.
Yeah.
So, and frankly, we shouldn't be doing that. There's a lot of things we shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't be doing it because Israel doesn't want us to do it. We should not be doing it for our own sovereignty and not be allowing foreign air bases inside of our. I mean, it's just you have to ask questions about where people's loyalties lie. And I don't, I'm not somebody that gets all weepy about the American flag and wrap myself in it or anything like that. But I do think that there is a case to be made that, like, you can't allow foreign countries' military to open bases inside your country. I mean, you're like, when we do that in Iraq and Syria, that is most definitely against their will, or maybe we've installed a government who then allows it. But in the early stages, that's not you don't do it because you're friends. I mean, this is not the Saudi relationship. It feels very much like the beginning of some sort of infestation. So I would say, let's not do it for anybody. Israeli, Qatari, Saudi, Canadians, and just to be on the safe side, all of them. Nobody, right? Nobody gets their bases here.
And I would add too, though, that, like, to what I said in the beginning, I mean, I know what the presentation is and how it's present. Like, we can't miss that Qatar was used as the facilitator of funding to Hamas through Israel, right? There's one point, there's a lot of those, though. And I think that, like with Egypt and UAE, that these are, it's nuanced, as always, multifaceted. There's different angles to it. But at the end of the day, I think that represents an Israeli interest in this country. As much as they say otherwise, or we don't want that, or yet the loomers out there going, it's Qatari influence over our politicians, I think there's a reason there, but I think we have to recognize what that really represents. A lot of these, fake, I shouldn't call it like that, but I think like with Egypt, that's one of the most obvious examples. Regime change put that person in power to be more amenable to Israel. The population does not like Israel, right? It's very that I think that's a lot of what we see right there. Why most of them, even Jordan, have failed to help Palestine, right? And so I think we have to think about the way that these regime changes have been used and not see them as necessarily what they want you to see them as. So I look at Qatari Air Base as might as well be an Israeli air base. That's how I kind of think of that. But either way, I agree. It should not be happening.
Yeah, I'm just in favor of them not doing. And by the way, I'm in favor of us closing our air bases all over the world as well. I want us to be out of Syria. And I mean, of course, it doesn't matter what I think or what I want. And I know why we're there. But I'm not somebody who's like, America, get all, out. I want our stuff back too. This is not how you behave when you set up your military bases in other countries. It's not even, even our relationship with Saudi Arabia sometimes feels like a hostage situation.
It is. It's a fake state. I mean, Saudi Arabia was basically set up in regard to the way they wanted this family to rule based on the interest of these foreign powers. I mean, it's not hard to see that, but I would argue that it really comes down to the principle of it all, right? It's to open an air base forcefully on someone else's country violates their sovereignty, right? It's not we pretend what Americans have always thought we are, what we're doing, So it goes back to the origin point of what we were designed as. If even if you think that wasn't ever what they truly intended, I believe that there was an origin point where it won out in that room discussing what we wanted this country to be, and that was a republic, right? And that was an idea that we were about defense, right? It was not about an empire. It was about as Bruce points out, the marching to your own drum, like the idea of the thinker and like the world and how we see ultimately we worry about our own. We were able to defend ourselves. We go to war only if people are attacking us. We do not go out and look for empire control. And we've long since lost touch with that. I mean, we just act like we have to because they would come after us. Otherwise, I frankly don't even think that's true.
Well, it might be true now after all the things we've done around the world. I mean, they certainly would have the justification to do it, but even still, we're protected on both sides by, I mean, the way to get America isn't an armada pulling up on the coast of Baltimore. It's to do it from the inside and subvert us internally and to weaken us culturally and morally and debase our currency and get us thinking differently. And of course, I think a case can be made that we've been conquered, at least on some levels, by these forces. And because of our geography, topography, and amount of straight up military power that we have, you can't hit us head on. You have to be more subversive about it. And unfortunately, we, the Americans, this society, this culture, very susceptible to it. And we get manipulated very easily. And we've allowed the barbarians inside the gate, and they have changed our society in a way that is very different than the way our parents grew up in. The world is gone.
Well, and I would argue that is, you may interpret that. And I mean, as any number of things, right? One of which could be the idea of immigration and how it's changed the country. But that doesn't make sense with the idea of the original mindset of this country. But any of those could be weaponized of any kind to, but the point is about the principle and and criminality, right? At the end of the day, we can clearly see where lines are crossed. But the moment governments create like an abstract lens to look through to then use, it's always the wrong step. And I think that's historically been very, very clearly proven. But I think that what we're seeing is the continuation, like you're talking about, of the decline of this, framing it otherwise. And I just, we need to get back to first principles. There really is. Let's put it this way: it's far less likely for us to be manipulated if we are erring aggressively on the side of what we believe our principles, our integrity. It becomes much more difficult for any of them. But to the end point about foreign governments. I would argue that even if with like a government mindset thinking, now that let's just say Americans voted to get rid of our government entirely. The argument is that, China will come in and invade and conquer. Well, you could argue maybe that's been in their intention. You could argue that maybe they would want to do it in retaliation. But I think that the powers we're dealing with today are the responsible entities for why we live in the world we do. Not that that there wouldn't ever be somebody that would rise back to that and decide to do the same thing. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's logical to think that they would do that for retaliation, or that it would even be in their interest in either sense with what you just described. It ends up, if your goal is empire and conquering and control, then it would, because you're willing to sacrifice anything. The question is that what they all want? Yeah, you could see that's what Israel wants. That's very easy. And you can see that Israel's, through their own actions, creating that what the American government wants. But I think it's worth asking whether that is truly what everybody would ultimately seek. And I would argue it's worth finding out at the very least, But any final comments for us, brother, on the way out?
I always appreciate coming on here. It's a great place to come and just work out some of these ideas, because it's, I reserve the right to change my mind about things if I'm presented with better information, and it's so hard to know what's really going on out there. But I think we've done a pretty good job of recognizing the narrative crafters and what they're pushing and why they want it, and the manipulation through the media. We've gotten, I think, better at recognizing this, but it's still a struggle. And ultimately, at the very end, I just want to, it just seems so frustrating to me, all of the energy that we collectively as a society spend on all of this nonsense, starting wars, keeping people down, manipulating people. Just if a tenth of this energy was focused on, like, I don't know, actually improving people's lives. We have all this technology and how it could be used. What does it get used for immediately? Military, right, when it could be used for helping people. It's frustrating in that regard. So I watch this world. I feel very uncomfortable sometimes. I'm trying to be optimistic. I think awareness is probably the best, the key for us. But boy, it's next month when we do this, I worry about, what are we going to be talking about then? Mm-hmm. It can't be worse, right? Please tell me it can't be worse, right? They can't still be murdering people in Gaza, right? Next month when we do this, please tell me that's not going to be happening, And so I think some of these topics, because they're heavy, take a toll on us just as observers, and imagine the toll from actually being there. You talk to Vanessa Beeley all the time, right? I mean, she's as close to it as anybody I know. And I do it such a disservice by even trying to imagine what that would be like. What an insult, I couldn't imagine. But just because I can't be there and don't want to be there and couldn't feel it, doesn't mean I won't talk about it, and do whatever I can do and whatever you can do to do it. And is it enough? No, it's never enough. Of course not. But it's something, and it's part of this change. It's part of this change in the zeitgeist, or just the understanding of where we are. Like, if some people are finally starting to ask questions, what are we doing here? Why is it like this? It doesn't have to be this way. Who is ruling over us? Why are we not allowed to criticize them? And what does this all mean? So hopefully good things come out of this. Hopefully this is just the hard part, the hard awakening where you're still groggy and it all feels like a dream. But, I'll see you next month, and we'll do it all again.
Absolutely, man. Well, I'll end with the thing that I often point out, which is that, I do already believe that. I believe that this is, it is there are positive outcomes with the fact that people are seeing it, calling it out, breaking down these lies. Those are positive changes in and of themselves. Look at it this way. And this is what plenty of Palestinians have pointed out as well. Israel's genocidal reaction is the consequence of what they're fighting for. And the point is that that's Israel's responsibility. They committed genocide, but it has awoken the world to what's always been happening. Now, nobody would have wanted to make that exchange. Like, the idea that that's worth it, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. But the point is that to understand that regardless of whether it's justified, which is clearly not, the consequence of what they've done has succeeded with what Palestinians have been trying to accomplish for a very long time, which is to get the world to pay attention to what they've been dealing with. And that is again, my point was that, Israel's reaction could have been different. And that still would, the positive thing would have been, everyone sees this now. If maybe without the reaction, it would have been different. But the point though, is there's a lot of those positive things to see. It's hard to see through the lens of an ongoing genocide or any other thing we're talking about. Like, as our country gets more and more authoritarian, it's hard to see the positives that are taking place, that people are starting to break down these classically held lies, but I just think it's worth to continue to reflect on that. I don't think we're in a world where the government's going to go, oh, you see us, you win, it's over. It's not going to happen. They're going to fight tooth and nail to make your life as hellish as possible to get back to where they can control it. So recognize that and try to find the positive side of breaking through these things and stand up and fight for it, because that's what we should be doing, But yeah, I agree. Thank you for being your brother. And we'll definitely talk about this more. And I think the more that people have these conversations, the more that this stuff can, it makes it a little bit more easier to endure, to at least try to understand why we are where we are. And again, why positive momentum is being had. So thanks again, brother. And as always, everybody out there, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.